we can experience soul loss from repeated experiences of loss of power, loss of vitality and life force, or from significant trauma, right? Anything that would cause us to want to protect ourselves in that moment, to feel safe. So a part of us experiencing that literally like fragments.
And we're back for another episode of Universe the Game. This one's all about shamanism with insights with Rachel. Okay, we talked about so many different aspects of shamanism, and this is a very fascinating topic to me because, as you know, if you've listened to these podcasts before or seen my work in general, I'm really interested in researching consciousness, and I feel like consciousness kind of gives its different faces in different traditions, but yet it's all the same thing. So it's a very fascinating discussion when we get into the deep nature of how certain groups of people and a whole culture viewed reality, and they saw it, and it's very similar in some ways to many other traditions that we've talked about previously. So we get into the tradition, what shamanism is, what are the deep knowledge that it contains, and how they view the world, and what they do, and how they heal, and how they prevent soul loss, and these other really fascinating topics. So I'm super excited to hear what your thoughts are on this episode. So as it goes along, drop a comment. Let me know what you think down below. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can always leave me a review. Your boy would really appreciate that. And also, if you want to just support the podcast, last thing, then we'll start. If you want to support the podcast in general, check out my book, 10 Secrets of Awakening. This is what allows this podcast to be ad-free. And it supports my work and allows me to literally keep doing this. So check it out. The Secrets to Understanding Consciousness, Life Transformation, and Self-Realization. Over 100 5-star reviews, all 5 stars. You guys really love the book, and I really appreciate it. So without further ado, well, wait, one more thing. I just wanted to say this is the first time I've ever done this. Give me a break. I made a mistake. Screwed up the recording. So what you're going to hear is not the highest quality audio. It's the Zoom audio. I don't use Zoom anymore to record these, but at the time I did. And it's not as great as I'd like. Okay. The actual recording, I recorded like this, where you can only see my face if you're on visual. And I didn't have her audio selected. It was the only time I've ever done that. So my bad. Other than that, it's a great podcast. It's still listenable by every means, but it's not studio quality as it usually is. Anyways, without further ado, really, here's Rachel in shamanism. Rachel, welcome to the podcast, Universe Game, back for another episode. And today's going to be great because you're about shamanism.
Yes.
And that's a first on the Universe Game. So, let's just kind of start there, and we'll get deep into a lot of different things, nature of reality. I've been following you for years, and we've been following each other for years, and this is the first time actually talking. So I'm glad that we actually got to have a conversation and people get to hear it, because I've been really interested in shamanism, but I haven't gotten a chance myself to. I just haven't explored the realms, and I know you have. So for someone, let's just say someone like me, who's kind of like a noob to shamanism, where would be somewhere you just kind of start? Because I know that there's so much culture behind it. There's so much. So what would you say it's about?
So ultimately, I would say shamanism is about maintaining harmony and balance on an individual level, in a community, and also collectively. So it's a way of life. There are some misconceptions that it's a religion, and it is not a religion. You can have any specific faith base, but ultimately the central theme of all shamanic practices is that we're all from spirit. And so we have to acknowledge that to maintain balance in all of these different areas of life, right? And so there are certain practices and techniques and ways of thinking to honor spirit and everything. But that's really like the fundamental, most important thing to know about shamanism. It's a way of life. Yes.
And so what would that way be?
Yeah. So recognizing that we live here in this ordinary reality, but we exist in non-ordinary reality, right? And so in like the shamanic community, you'll often hear people say that non-ordinary reality is actually more real than this physical reality, just meaning that the energetic is so fundamental to life. And so shamanism, by practicing shamanism, reminds us of that crucial element of life is that we are spirit, we're energy. And when we forget that, then we experience disharmony and imbalance, and we see, illness, chaos, destruction on all levels. So we have to remember that component, that we're energy, we're spirit. Yeah.
And so it's just like an overall, you understand kind of what's not, I wouldn't say fully, because I think it's very tough to understand infinity, but to rather grasp kind of what's going on here. And so when you're saying that energy is more fundamental and there's a non-ordinary reality that's more real, I really resonate with that, because I've experienced myself experiences where it's just really feels like this is just a watered down version of something that has more real than even this. And I think that's hard to comprehend. Yeah, because if you look at the ultimate level, you start looking at like sages and Eastern traditions, they'll be like, what's real? And their answer is the unchangeable.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, so only the formless is really real. But you
Right.
could say that another level of the veil is lifted to kind of like in my book, I talk about Fourier transforms and how energy, it's actually energy that we're perceiving as physical. So is that something that kind of is in shamanism as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that we see here begins in the energetic realm, right? Everything that's manifested has an energetic component. And so when we're looking at like shamanic healing, that's what we keep in mind when we're trying to create balance in a person. It's like, what is going on the energetic level that's creating disharmony here, right? And so we know energetically, thoughts and emotions are kind of lingering here in our energy field. And so that's what's creating our physical body and the physical reality that we see manifested. So, yeah.
Yeah. So if someone's, because I actually just had Fergus on it, and by the time this comes out, it'll be a little bit, but I did a podcast with Fergus and he talked about healing. And I'd love to get your perspective on shamanic healing. You know, and it's encompassing, and I know we just kind of talked about it, but so is what you're basically saying with shamanic healing is that energetically, it's kind of like the same thing as what he was saying. I don't think there's any specific background to what he's saying, but in shamanic, is it always, is it sometimes plant medicines? Is it not plant medicines? How much of that is a part of shamanism? Because I know that there's a lot of different things, and I guess it would almost be good to kind of understand, because my next question would be, there's probably a bunch of different types of it, just like other things. There's plenty of different interpretations, you know.
Oh, absolutely. So I'll just explain a little bit about what I do as a shamanic practitioner. So somebody would come to me with an ailment of some kind, right? Some pattern in their life, whether that's a pattern of illness in the body, a behavior, a thought pattern, something that they are wanting to shift and change. And so when they come to me for a healing, one of the major components of shamanic healing is that the shamanic practitioner goes into an altered state of consciousness to assess their energy body, to assess what is happening in non-ordinary reality that is contributing to the imbalance here. And so from a shamanic perspective, illness originates kind of like in 5 different ways. And so those are power loss, soul loss, which I can go into because
let's just go. Can you just go into each one as you say it?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Okay. So first of all, power loss. From a shamanic perspective, again, we are all energy. We all have a soul. We all have a life force that animates us here, that keeps us alive. And so that's like your source of power. You can even kind of think of it like your battery life. And so there are a lot of different things that we do here that drain our power, that drain our life force. And so over time, the more power we are losing, the less vitality we have, and like that, that creates imbalance. And so it's going to manifest as an illness on a lot of different levels, physically, mentally, emotionally. Okay, so that's power loss, right? And I guess a couple or an example of how we lose power, going against our inner truth, right? Saying yes when we want to say no, overextending ourselves, placing ourselves or staying in situations that go against, our truth, what we believe, what we actually want. And so it can be really subtle instances of this over time, where we're essentially going against our truth, right? And if we do that over and over and over, we can also experience something called soul loss. So that's the second cause of illness from a shamanic perspective. So soul loss is not just when we're losing power, but when an aspect of our consciousness kind of fragments. So in modern psychology, we kind of think of that kind of like dissociation, right? We're fragmented. We're almost like losing an essence or an aspect of ourselves. And so we can experience soul loss from repeated experiences of loss of power, loss of vitality and life force, or from significant trauma, right? Anything that would cause us to want to protect ourselves in that moment to feel safe. So part of us experiencing that literally like fragments. That's, I think, the best way that I can explain soul loss.
And so when it fragments, is it like, where does it go?
Well, and so there is where non-ordinary reality comes in. And so also from a shamanic perspective, reality is broken up into, we call it the three worlds. So we have the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. So this soul piece actually goes to one of these levels, one of these realms, right, of the spirit world, of non-ordinary reality. And so a shamanic practitioner then goes to access those. So somebody comes in for a shamanic session, and we identify, what's going on. Is it power loss, soul loss? We can help to kind of identify that. And then we do a journey. We go into an altered state of consciousness to create change in non-ordinary reality. So whether that means identifying the cause of the power loss and helping bring that power back, or finding that lost soul piece that's in one of these non-ordinary layers of reality, right?
Mm.
And it's, for a lot of people who've never heard of it before, it's very strange to consider, but we have to remember the terminology that is often used in shamanic work has kind of like a similar concept in modern psychology, but shamanic healing originated, in ancient times when we didn't have modern psychology. So a lot of the terminology just hasn't really changed. But it's all very, very real things happening energetically. And I think the reason why shamanic healing is so powerful and significant is because it's looking at, again, that energetic component to health to create wholeness in an individual, rather than just looking at the thoughts or the behaviors. It's like, well, what is actually going on within that person's vital life force within the soul that is creating imbalance? And so that's where I come in. Through that altered states of perception. So
I gotcha. And just so you know, when you're saying it might sound weird, it's like we've talked about so many things on this podcast. That's not even close to weird here in this space. So
I figured.
don't feel, well, you can feel how you want, but just understand that we get into the esoteric and the things that, because when you're exploring reality, a lot of things are going to sound weird to you.
For sure.
If you're thinking about it from a perspective of what you would consider a normal, I guess. Is that the word I'm looking for? Kind of like the
ordinary,
because that's what we're doing. We're comparing it against to what we think when we look at society, the majority believes. So from that perspective, it might look weird, but you've got to understand that the ordinary society don't got it figured out. It's very clear. I mean, like I've always said, I'd rather be considered different in a society. I'd rather be considered insane in a society that's insane, because then to me, I might be figuring it out. And I've talked about that for years with the matrix of society and how, basically it's very, very simple. And these concepts start to break out of that mold. And so, yeah, later I'd like to get into kind of how you got into it and stuff like that, but
Definitely.
continue if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Yes. So I wanted to kind of revisit before I forget. You had asked about plant medicine. And so again, a very important component of shamanic work is that altered state of consciousness that the shamanic healer goes into. Because again, we're not just working in the physical reality, we're going into those non-ordinary layers that are very, very real, and they're there. We just can't perceive them in our ordinary states of consciousness. So one way that a shamanic practitioner may alter their consciousness is through plant medicines. We also use, so psilocybin, ayahuasca seems to be kind of a buzzword right now, but they alter our awareness to see what is very real, what is very much there, and what is very much contributing to either illness or health in a person. So the other way that we can kind of alter our states of consciousness is through like drumming, rattling, things like that. We're moving into that theta brainwave state, which I kind of refer to as twilight, because it's that space of awareness right when you're falling asleep, and then also right when you're waking up, but you're not fully alert and you're just tuned into things. Even there's like heightened creativity, visualization, imagination. The imaginal realm is very sharp, or it can be. And so we use all of that to track the energy of a person to see what's going on, what needs to be kind of shifted. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, that's classic to me when I think about shamanism is the drums.
Oh yeah.
Just the constant and it does remind me, and it's very interesting. I haven't thought about the connection, but in a while, but you have certain cultures that might hum. It seems like more Eastern traditions will have mantras and these things. And then in shamanism, you probably do some of that, but I feel like it's more, you've got the constant beat, and the beat is what allows you to kind of sink in. So when you're getting into theta, is that when you start to take off? Like, is it basically for the shaman? Is it an out of body experience to like, will I be able to, like, say I'm a shaman, am I going to be able to see if my dog has some, Jax here has some energetic blockages? And I don't know if that dogs are even, I'm sure it might be a thing.
Oh yeah, totally.
And so would I be in what you might call a specific realm, and I can see his energy form, and then am I going in like with my body, or am I able to like do it from how?
Yeah.
Could you explain that for me?
Fascinating. Very good question. Okay, so there's a lot of ways I want to respond to this. So to begin, when we go into that altered state of consciousness, it's the shamanic practitioner, or the shaman or shamanic healer's job to figure out which layer of reality needs to be visited to create change. So for instance, so this is where the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world come into play. And we're traveling there. We're in our body, but our consciousness is visiting those layers of the client. And that can be kind of hard to understand, but it's really kind of feels like an inward journey. So we're using our intuition. So we're in our body. Yes, we're in our body, but it's like, I guess maybe kind of projecting our consciousness into their layers of their aura. So you're seeing everything kind of in your mind's eye, I guess is how I would describe it, right? But depending on what the client's issue is. So for instance, if they need a soul retrieval, we're often going to go to the lower world to retrieve that piece of soul. So the lower world is, we can think of it kind of like the subconscious mind. It's all these things that are going on below the surface, or even like like within the earth, within nature, our ancestral lineages, Oh gosh, yeah, things like that. But I think something that's really interesting, which maybe people can kind of relate to, the concept of the middle world is everything that we perceive right now here in ordinary reality, but just in that like astral layer. So it's kind of related to things like remote viewing, astral projection, because we're here on the earth, but we're perceiving just behind the veil of the physical reality, rather than going to kind of like a purely spiritual dimension. We're here on the earth, but just shifting our awareness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, good stuff. That was a good job explanation. I mean, that's gonna be a tough topic to even talk about.
Yeah.
It reminds me of World of Warcraft, how in there's this when you I guess you would you call it die? I don't know. When you lose your health in the body, and you're at 0, you have to click release spirit, and then there's you have to basically run back to your body, and then you can go back into your body. And so that's what this kind of reminds me of a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's completely the same, but that you're still in the world, you're just in a different layer.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the middle world for sure. Totally the middle world.
And so would the lower world be considered like classically like the archetypical demonic realm, or is that something that, how does shamanism feel about that? And I'm not saying that it's necessarily like the religious archetype, but rather that's kind of as people would understand.
Right. Oh, this is a fantastic question. Okay. So considering the concept of demon outside of a religious context, just being like dense, heavy energy, I kind of view it, and from a shamanic perspective, we view it as an unhealed aspect. So it's got a lot of that density, right? And it's kind of clinging and wanting power, or wanting that life force, high vibration from us here. And so I would say that's actually hanging out in the middle world. So yeah, the middle world is kind of the space where you can find like spiritual riffraff, is what they say. So like if you want to go to the lower world and you want to go to the upper world, there are gatekeepers, like a bouncer to get in. And so you have to have a pure intention, and it controls the spiritual beings that are allowed to inhabit those areas. But the middle world is a free-for-all. And so yeah, like, okay, so the concept of like ghosts and all that kind of stuff, that's middle world.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, middle world stuff for sure. And my perspective about ghosts is a little different than a lot of people's. Yeah, so I really feel like it's a lot of just that like heavy, dense energy that over time kind of compounds to become this I don't even know how to explain it, like poltergeist, a poltergeist kind of thing. It can influence reality, right? But I don't know if it's a true sentient being, or if it's just energy that has momentum. Does that make sense? So let me give you an analogy here. Like when we touch something, we leave our thumbprint. Okay, so that's truly an aspect of us, but it's not our consciousness. It's not our sentience, right? But it's still there. And so everything that we experience in reality, we can often leave energy here. If it's emotionally charged, if it's traumatic, we create an imprint. And so that's what kind of lingers here in this like middle world. And so when people say like, oh, this place is haunted, what they're saying is, I'm sensing all of this heavy, dense energy that's been left here from really emotionally charged traumatic situations, but it's not a sentient being, right? And so I'm a little on the fence with the ghost thing, but that's my perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that, it brought up for me kind of like an echo.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
that the second isn't you, your echo isn't you, but it might still be there and it might linger for a while. So if there is that uh, ghost type energy, or yeah, again, it's an archetype, this energy of people feeling like a negativity, what are some things that shamanism will start to
Mm.
use, or how do they cleanse that? And before we get into that, I just want to say this real quick, that I watched a documentary a while ago about how these people were going to do ayahuasca, and they had to get like basically bounced by, but it was actually physical people, that there were people that had to ingest a specific thing. I can't remember what it was, and that cleared them out. But also the shaman, I don't know if it was specifically a shaman, I can't remember. I would think it was for this kind of culture over there. I'm not sure where it was in the world. I know that's very general, but she was basically like, yeah, you had a negative spirit attached to you,
Yeah.
and just casually. And the guy's like, what?
Yeah. So the thing is, okay, it's incredibly common to have what we refer to as attachments. Um, Most people at some point in time in their life will have one. Okay. And so
Wait, you're telling me most people have a spirit negative attachment?
at some point in time,
Yeah.
yes. So the thing to remember uh, is that we are creating, and I know you know this, basically the thoughts and the emotions and the things that we hold within our energy field, the behaviors we perpetuate, we are then attracting things that are a vibrational match to us. And so on some level, we do have to take full responsibility for our own health, our energetic health, because if we are doing things that kind of like weaken our life force, weaken our aura, we're more susceptible. So there comes a point in time, if we've experienced a lot of trauma, we're perpetuating a lot of behaviors that kind of diminish our life force. Maybe we're not acting out of integrity, or we're, violating the autonomy of other people. We're creating a very low life force within us. And so we're a magnet to those things that want, right? So we have to think about that. How can we strengthen our energy, our aura, so that we're not a match to kind of those people even call them like energy vampires. We have those people in real life, right? And so that stuff is also happening on the astral realm. So the very first thing that I can say that's within our control is to elevate your vibration, heal yourself, eat nourishing foods, take care of your body, take care of your mental health and your emotional health, so that you're releasing some of that density, that, stagnant energy. And if you're not a match to stuff, then it really won't impact you. And so that's your responsibility as a human being is to maintain your health and your vitality, right? And so I always like to say too, it's not something that we have to be afraid of. So we don't have to worry that like anytime we go somewhere, something's going to attach to us. We just need to be responsible for our boundaries as well, and standing in our own integrity and our truth, and honoring our autonomy and the autonomy of other people. And then we're not a match to that stuff,
Okay. Very nice. So
Yeah.
when you're elevating your vibration, how do you see that?
Well,
How do you see how do you see that process?
For me, my understanding of it is our mental, emotional, and physical health. And so even from a shamanic perspective, health encompasses the physical, the mental, emotional, and then the spiritual. What is your connection to remembering that we're all one? How do you honor that in your life and in the world? How do you take care of your physical body and your emotions and your thoughts, so you're clearing away a lot of that trauma that keeps you stuck in cycles of power loss, victim mentality. And I even struggle sometimes to say the word victim mentality, because that's a very real thing, to be a victim of something, right? But it's how do you then kind of reclaim your ability to your ability and your responsibility to create your reality in a way, right? What do you want to see in your reality? How are your thoughts and your behaviors lining up to that? How are you releasing stagnant emotional wounds, all of that? So raising your vibration to me is synonymous with healing trauma and taking care of yourself.
Just cleaning house a little bit.
Cleaning house. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. It's, do you love yourself, and how do you show yourself that? How do you show other people love and, remembrance of unity? So we're creating harmony and balance, that principle of shamanism, that we're all spirit. That's what I'd say.
So it's almost like when you're raising your vibration, it's where is love not being allowed in?
Yeah.
So you can't really be afraid of letting love. I mean, you can. It's probably possible. People definitely might feel that because it might be scary. It might be difficult depending on where you're at in certain areas. If you've been hurt or if people have done things. So it's about opening up even when it feels uncomfortable. And then when you open up, you realize that that's how you wanted to feel in the first place. And not even, for me, it was not really opening up to other people as much, but opening up to myself. And it's when you feel safe within yourself, then you begin to be able to open up around everyone. And then no one can really take that away from you because it's within you and you're not projecting that. So when you say in shamanism that everything is spirit, how do you look at that in terms of, is it one spirit? Is it many spirits? Is it fractals? Or what does that look like?
Yeah. So the way that I view that is that we're all here with our individual aspects of the one spirit, the one source. You could say whatever name, right? God, creator. And shamanic terminology, we often say creator, but that we're all from that, right? So I always think of the analogy too, like you see the ocean is source, creator, and then we're all little drops, right? Having our own experiences. And so if we want to take it a step further, we have the ocean, we have a drop, and then we have our little drops when we come into our physical bodies, but above our physical body, we're a higher mind, right? And then we're connected to the even higher mind. So when you combine us all, we're the same consciousness, having individual experiences as different consciousness, we have our own perspectives right now, but ultimately separation is an illusion because we're all from the same source.
And there it is.
And there it is. Yeah.
So as you move through this understanding in the shamanistic perspective, do you eventually move back into source? And is that a voluntary thing, or is it just like a once you've reached a certain level thing, or how does that work?
So this is kind of like my own perspective.
Yeah.
Also coupled with, I guess, shamanic worldview as well, that yes, reincarnation. So we definitely acknowledge past lives as being influential in this life. So that's actually another component to maintaining health here is what are the ancestral or what are the past life, or you want maybe use the word karmic threads that we're continuing here. And so part of this experience also is balancing out that karma or balancing out the things we've experienced in alternate lives. And how can we heal that and, move forward. So then in the next life, or, in our alternate experiences, we're not carrying those threads with us that are creating imbalance. But yeah, we're constantly experiencing different realities, not even just physically here, but like what other planets, dimensions, different types of beings. I mean, the sky's the limit, I think, but the whole point is evolution of your awareness that we're all from one source. And so in each experience, we're kind of perceiving things at a different level. And it's the game is to, move yourself up in your understanding of connection, right? And remembering that the separation is part of the game, right? Part of experiencing life, but that ultimately when we're out of this, we're all connected. Yeah.
I love it when people come on and they talk about the game without me having to ask how do they think the game works and try on the universe game. You know, it's just great. It's like that sweet spot.
Yeah.
When you hit that time. So did we talk about all five? Did we cover all five?
Oh, no. Okay. So I said power loss, soul loss, karmic or past life issues can be contributing to illness. And then I did say ancestral, so that's 4, but then 5 is disconnection from nature, which is huge, which, I mean, think about reality now where we live a lot of our lives on our technology. We communicate with people purely through technology, which is great. It's wonderful, right? That we can connect, but then we forget that, you know, our roots are connected to Mother Nature. And so when we're not spending time honoring nature, honoring animals, honoring the fact that not only human beings are of spirit, but everything in creation is of spirit, we create imbalance. And so I think that's a huge one that I see, and something that's so easy to incorporate into your life is going outside and walking on the grass for 5 minutes, sitting in the sun for 5 minutes, you know, talking to your plants, all of that. That's
yeah,
huge.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk under the cover. I don't know how many people have heard this, but that plants are a lot more conscious than a lot of people think that they are.
Oh yeah. And from a shamanic perspective, we will often, so we use plant medicines, of course, for healing, but we can also communicate with spirits of plants. And so when we take a shamanic journey to the lower world, I could talk to my plant. What do you need? How can I better help you thrive here? Because your leaves are looking kind of brown, right? And so we don't do that anymore. People don't really do that. So it's, yeah, how can we work in reciprocity and be in right relationship? So we're creating harmony for each other and, you know, yeah.
Very nice. So just so I can kind of map this out in my brain here, we have the middle world, which is kind of like the free-for-all realm.
Yep.
And it's not the demonic area or the archetype of that energy or the negativity or the vampire, as we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at the higher, is that where the in-between incarnation is?
I would say, so, yeah. So while we identified the 3 primary layers, they can also be kind of separated into additional layers. But once we're in the upper world, we are in, yeah, the layer of our higher selves, the spirit guides, other like archangels, you know, anything that is that higher perspective connected to unity and love and you know, the highest truth, if we want to say that. But yeah, so we can communicate with
all types of beings.
Yeah, all types of beings, alien, I mean, whatever.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about like channeling and that type of stuff?
So I feel that it's something that we need to be more responsible with. I think that right now, again, the concept of channeling is kind of a buzzword. So everybody wants to learn how to channel. And it's like, okay, so while you're here in your physical human body, what is your level of awareness? Because you're going to connect with beings that you can reach vibrationally in a way, right? And so because also we know about this middle world full of spiritual riffraff, people often connect with things that are not actually what they say that they are. So you just have you have to have so much discernment, and you have to be really healthy within yourself and really full of your own power if you want to channel. And even then, I say to consider what people are channeling with discernment, because you don't know exactly who they're channeling, and they're also filtering it through their human mind. So yes, I believe it's a real thing, absolutely, but also always use discernment, always.
I'm
Yeah.
just lighting some incense here while you're talking.
Oh, sure.
I'm definitely listening.
Yeah.
So with channeling, it's been a whole hero's journey with me, because with the law of one, and everyone knows I get really deep into the law of one, and I've seen so many other channelers, and you'll have listened to, by the time this comes out, it'll be after the Brian Scott podcast. And Brian Scott is big on the law of one. And if you want to know more about my journey with channeling, you're going to want to listen to that podcast, because that podcast will be directly about the law of one and channeling and how that works, because that's already what the topic is. So just on a side note, but on a very quick note, I'm 100% with you. I've been in the community of spirituality and religion since I basically grew up. And I started in my dad was Catholic and my mom was kind of non-denominational. She wasn't that serious, but my dad was a little bit more serious. So we went to Catholic church, and then we also went to non-denominational church because they were divorced. So, we kind of went to both. And I started to really contemplate even back then, what is this? What is the word of God? Is that channeled? And it would be essentially, yeah, it kind of is. And so as we go along here, I think people started to recognize, especially with the age of technology, that we started to see that other people could kind of still do that, or at least were claiming to. In the beginning, it really, in terms of what I came across, I every once in a while I would go to like expos where it was not, I never saw a person speak at the expos, but I just kind of went in and looked at all the shops and all the things, and there's like psychics everywhere. And I noticed that there was a lot of angel channelers. And I thought that was interesting to me. And I have had readings by angel channelers, but that was a while ago. So that was kind of my first experience. And I was always very skeptical, coming from like a logical background. It was hard, especially I think for men, to understand that there are things outside of what we can see, because society conditions men a lot. And not that it doesn't condition women, because it does. But I find that I've met a lot of women who are much more able. I found very few men who are able to actually tap into channeling. And I think there are really good ones, like Bashar does, I think, a great job of channeling. But with channeling, it's as though I find that a lot of people will just close their eyes and be like, boom, channeling. And every time I see that, I'm like, I think there's a good chance, just say, because we gotta say this. We gotta call it out, people. Sometimes a lot of people will think that they're channeling, but they haven't had the spiritual development to understand that they're just channeling their own ego still. And that you really gotta dig deep into the person and really see, of course, take it if it resonates, if that's what you feel is right. And I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do, but I think it's important to really have discernment with channeling, because it's like anyone can come up with it. And I think that's why it's also important to have discernment with books that are written, like have discernment even with the Bible, have discernment with the law of one, have discernment with any books that are channeled, and that we can't necessarily, this is kind of where I'm at. It's like I can't see the person or talk to the person directly when it's channeled. So I'm always really analyzing it, not necessarily from a logical, but I'm just understanding and taking it with a grain of salt, and also understanding that, yes, we can all do that too. And there's a journey to get there. And I feel like, and I'd love to hear your perspective, when people are legit channeling, because it is, I do want to say that it does happen, and it's really, really profound when it does. but it's a whole journey to get there. And it's almost like the channeler has to have the ability to discern the dark from the light in that realm, or the vampire energy that might have an agenda versus the energy of love or the energy of harmony, and that's being relayed. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. I think it can be really damaging in some way when people are channeling and giving a lot of information that other people are basing major life decisions on, because yeah, we have absolutely no way to validate that information. And you know, people, I think there are some people, depending on their level of development, they like to place people on pedestals who have these special abilities or these special gifts. And it's like, no, really everybody as a spiritual being could reach that, right? Like, you can connect with source or God or creator yourself. You can cultivate that connection. You don't have to go to somebody else who may be doing it from an egotistical place for recognition.
Yeah, that's a big thing too.
Yeah, you got to be so careful. Are they doing it to truly serve or self-serve, or serve the collective and humanity? And that's such a fine line, because I think it takes I think it takes a lot of dedication to your own like healing journey and your own journey of evolution and awareness to be able to truly do that. And it just seems like at this point, so many people, they want the recognition to say, I have this special ability, because what is going on within them that's saying like, I want to be special, right? And so we always have to look at that too. What is their motive for this, sharing this information, you know?
Yeah, and if you're an amateur channeler, we're not calling you out.
No, right. Yeah, right.
I'm serious.
I know. And it's really
just want the best for you, and just want to give you what we know and what we've experienced.
Yeah.
Because the more I can help you to see where I've been duped and where I've been kind of led astray, it's kind of like, you don't have to go down that path now. I mean, you can, but you can also go down that path with that understanding. And I think that's kind of how we evolve. And I think that's a big point of the podcast. It's not to, I think it's pretty clear through Universe the Game that I'm not trying to tell you what is, but I'm just trying to open you up. And it might trigger you sometimes when I open you up to new perspectives, that this could be BS, or this could be not BS. This could be actually have some foundation to it. And tomorrow, I'm going to have on another guest who is very polarizing on what he believes. And I'm like, let's just get into it. So I'm not one to try and tell you how to believe or what to believe. It's really just, this is what I've experienced, and it's kind of my personal view and your personal view, and you know, take it or leave it.
Totally. Well, and the thing that I always like to think about as somebody who does utilize my intuition in the work that I do, with this responsibility, or this, I don't even like to call it an ability, it's just a skill that I have worked to refine, comes such significant responsibility. And so if you are within this field of work, to recognize what a strength it can be to influence someone's life. But that, I mean, if we think, you know, as far as like karmic repercussions, always use integrity, right? Always use integrity and honesty and discernment in what you're delivering and your intention. And yeah, that's the whole purpose, I think, of this segment here, is to have discernment.
Yeah. And Carla Rucker was a channeler for a while. She channeled the Law of One, and take it or leave it, she used to say that whenever you're channeling, like she went into this whole thing about how to actually do that. So she was saying how whenever anyone, even if you're channeling or not, but especially channeling, whenever your light gets brighter, the darkness comes harder. And so it's almost as like, if you're opening up to that, the negativity or the darkness, whatever you want to call it, it tries to get in there. And it's like, that's a perfect way for you to be manipulated.
Yeah.
And just in my own personal experience, that's why I haven't channeled. I've never I've never specifically tried to channel because I felt like I'm already kind of channeling, and I think we all are. And I don't think that I need to channel another entity to relay wisdom. And I think that we all have that wisdom just within ourselves and through our experiences, and also through just how we feel about life. And, you can put a name on it, or you don't have to. It's like, you still have a lot of wisdom. I think everyone does. And there's certain people that will need to hear a message, or will really help hearing messages from people who don't expect it. Like, I bet a lot of people that are listening to this podcast have something that they want to share, but they might feel anxiety. They might feel like, oh, I can't because I don't look good enough. I don't have a page, yada, yada. That's how everyone starts out.
Right.
I don't know about you, but when I started, I had all that. I was like, I don't know what, oh, there's so many people so far ahead of me. And then my TikTok hit like 200,000 in the first like couple months, like very quickly. And I'm like, oh, so all you got to do is just share how you really feel. And you'll be surprised how the universe, you could say, will start to open up doors. And that's a theme for me. Is it might seem like it's an unknown, and it is an unknown what will happen, but it's really what I want. I really want to help people and share in that way. And in this age where I can talk to you and you're in Wisconsin and I'm in Arizona, how amazing that is. And across the world, I just did one in Spain. I had a guest on from Spain, and that was really interesting too. And like the fact that I can do that, I think speaking is such a powerful way to share your perspective. So I just wanted to encourage anyone. This is not to say don't do it. This is say get out and try it. You have to experiment for things to start to take off. And I've seen your evolution. You've come so far with what you're doing. And again, I've been following you for a while, and yeah, you've really figured it out. And it's been a trial and error, I bet, for you. And we've talked about that before. And when I say this is the first time talking, I meant like we've voice noted for a long time.
Right.
But so for us both, it's been a trial process of figuring out how we can authentically express ourselves.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I think over the last like 2 years, since I've kind of had an Instagram page, it's really been a journey of am I putting out this information to somehow benefit me, or is my true intention to help serve? And that's been the whole, like the biggest, the most positive shift is really coming from the heart. Yeah.
And we just talked about this a little bit before the podcast, how it's so funny that when you just make a video and you don't care about how many views or whatever happens, it does really well. The lighting doesn't have to be good. Everything doesn't matter as much as you think it does. And as someone who's a perfectionist, I mean, look at this camera. I mean, I went out of my way to get this to look really good. And I think it's okay for YouTube. Like, it's good for YouTube. But for Instagram and TikTok, it really doesn't matter as much. And, there's a guy named Ryan Trahan, if you're on YouTube, he's got almost 10 million subscribers, and he's doing vlogs on his iPhone. Like, just get out. And he's, it's not as your brain tries to think you need to have all these thresholds to achieve success. And one of those for me was making it look a certain way. But I've really had to decondition myself from that. Right. And, I still like that. I still have a personal preference for the cool looking stuff, and it sounds good and these things. I don't think it hurts, but I definitely stopped myself from sharing so many times because I thought that there was things that I needed to have or I needed to be, when really I just needed to authentically be myself. And then when you were, then people are just like, all right, so you're like me, you're relatable. And I think that's a big thing.
Oh yeah.
Because we're also similar, but there's this persona that comes up because you want people to like you. It's just a human tendency. It's just tribal.
Yep.
We want to be accepted. And ironically, the things in this world that's filled with information, it's not as though relaying information is always going to be the way that people accept you. It can be being unique in how you really are. Like, I actually think I'm pretty funny offline, but I have this talk a lot with people. It's been a whole journey to let that comedic side of myself come out, because you just don't know. And my ego has always been like, oh, you're this teacher, so you can't really be them both. And I've always thought to myself, well, nobody's really doing what I want to do. And I'm thinking to myself at the same time, but that's a really good thing, because then there's no other person but me that is me, you know?
Well, and even two people could be sharing the same information, and we each bring our own unique energetic signature to it, right? There's that phrase that says, you are the medicine.
Exactly.
It can be what you're sharing, but ultimately it's you and how you show up and how you resonate with people and how people resonate with you, right? And so your words, yes, are important, but it's what is the energy behind them? The intention behind them is
paramount. That's right. So what's the meaning of life?
Oh, wow. That's could answer for me.
Yeah, of course. Of course for you. I mean, it doesn't, what do you think?
Just to be alive. I think we put a lot of expectations on what it means to be alive. And I think ultimately it's whatever you feel like you want it to be. It's different for every single person, but ultimately it's like what brings you joy, what reminds you of your connection to source, how can you help serve other people, and to experience things that open up your mind to new experiences, figuring out what you like, what you don't like, having fun. That's it. I think we complicate it too much a little bit, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, they say it's really just about learning how to kind of be in the world and be a human and figuring out what that means for you.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've asked every single guest that question so far, because I know that it's kind of a question that you can actually turn in that way, where it's almost like you are the meaning.
You are, yeah.
That the meaning is already here.
Yeah.
And any meaning outside of that is what you make it.
Totally.
It's kind of like if the meaning of life is almost to play the game. Like you're in the game, the meaning is to play it. And so when I say that you are the meaning, it's like you're here playing. So there are things, there's an infinite amount of things that you could do in the game, but that's just your choice. Whatever like you said, whatever feels good to you. And life's going to be a roller coaster. I almost think that life is meant in some respects for us to get lost in it. That's almost kind of part of the point of the game, to experience what that would be like. Because maybe we can't experience things like that outside of this realm in this way. And it's might be a gift to be kind of have this hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell used to say, where you've actually talked about this a lot today, where the ordinary world. In Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, his book called Hero with a Thousand Faces, and he has a hero's journey book. Basically, the premise is that you go from the ordinary world to the supernatural world, and then you come back with the wisdom, and you share with the people in the ordinary world the wisdom. And it's like the treasure.
Right.
And so I feel like we're all doing that.
Yeah, we've come here and we've that veil of forgetting, right? That people talk about. You've chosen this identity to experience reality with a lot of dynamics. And it's almost, how can I remember that I am here creating? And there is a lecture by, I think, Alan Watts, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but this musician, Akira the Don, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, blends the speech by Alan Watts and some music. And it says, what would you do if you were God? And so we can take God out of like the religious context, right? But what if you, in your purely spiritual form, wanted to experience something, wanted to learn something? You would create this adventure for yourself that you could experience in physical reality with all of the dynamics that are unique to the human experience. And you'd make it as absolutely interesting as possible to grow yourself in the most significant way that you can, because when you're outside of this physical time-space reality, you can't you don't experience all the duality and polarity and the, you know, even the suffering and the trauma that in some way shapes us, right? And so it's, yeah, how can I move through these experiences and remember that I, you know, my divinity or my my connection to source. That's it. Can you remember? And then can you be intentional about what you're creating? That's the meaning of life for me.
And there it is, folks.
Yeah.
And there it is. That's incredible. Yeah. And so if you find that lecture, send me a DM and I'll put it in the description for this podcast.
I will.
Cool. So one last question for you then. Let's say that you had a group of shamans that all came together and they were like, all right, Rachel, let's go. You've lived a great life, but it's time. We're moving on. We need to go to a different planet. We need to do something different. You're not going to be able to talk to anyone on the earth again. You can bring whoever you want with you, of course. But you have one last time to tell anyone on earth anything. What would you tell people before you left for the last time?
Oh, wow. This is a good question. To remember truly at your core that you are loved, but you are love. And that, you know, find as much joy and opportunity to enjoy creating while you're here. It's about creating and playing just as much about learning and doing the work, finding moments of joy, because, you know, all the work doesn't matter if we're not experiencing moments of joy throughout. So you're loved, you are love, and cultivate some creativity through playing and joy. Yeah, I think that's it. All
right, Universe of Game. Rachel, thanks for coming on for an amazing podcast. Such a pleasure. Now, I've got one more question for you. Yeah. Where can people find you? What are you doing? What's going on with you?
So if you are on Instagram, my Instagram handle is Insights with Rachel. Just like that. No special characters, numbers, anything. Insights with Rachel. You can also, my website, I'll throw that in here. It's a long one, but it's Illuminate Intuitive Insights LLC.com. You can find all the services that I offer. I do, shamanic healing, Reiki, also some intuitive coaching, because I'm trained as a mental health therapist. So I blend it all together. But
we didn't even talk about that. Shit.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have to come back on now, folks.
I will,
Part 2.
Anytime. Yeah, so I'd say there. And then finally, my email is intuitive.rachel.insights@gmail.com. And Rachel is just EL at the end.
Gotcha. And so you have a link tree or something like that?
No, but if you go to my Instagram, the link is there for my website, and then you can contact me through that.
Okay. I was just going to say, I'll put that in the description. So I'll put all the stuff that she just mentioned. Just look at the description of wherever you're watching. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, there's going to be all the information, all the links to what she does, what she's doing, where you can find her, and you can click it super easy. So you can find her there. And yeah, that should do it. So thank you again for coming on.
Yes.
What a great podcast.
It's been great. Thank you, Nick.
What a great episode. And again, I just wanted to say, my bad on the audio quality for that. Hopefully it didn't overshadow the podcast too much. I know it wasn't as great as it usually is, but that's the way she goes. I hope you still enjoyed this episode. And if you did, drop a nice 5-star review for your boy on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. And if you're on YouTube, let me know again what you thought of this podcast. What are your thoughts on shamanism after, taking the time to really learn about it? I'd love to hear what you think. Drop a like if you'd like. Otherwise, the last thing I'm going to say to you is, again, support the podcast, 10 Secrets of Awakening, my book. Check out the book. I think it'll really help you if you're interested in these topics. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next podcast. And until then, peace.